Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest Pathfinders podcast. Uh, Today we're going to be talking about disability in movies. Yeah, I will pass over to the panel to introduce themselves. Do you want to start, Ravi?
Yeah, hello, my name is Ravi. I've got Duchenne and I'm 31, living in London. And yeah, I hope to give you some good ideas about films to watch. And yeah, let's see how this goes.
Great, thanks, Ravi. Bobby, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Bobby. I have Duchenne. I'm from Hull and I'm 27.
My name is Juri. I'm from Estonia. I'm a leader of Estonian Muscular Disease Association and also have Duchenne, and I'm treated 23 years old.
Great. Yeah, so we've been talking just before the podcast about the kind of movies that we might watch, and yeah, we've all had time to actually go off and watch some of the movies that maybe we haven't encountered before. So it'd be good to chat about that. Yeah, who wants to start us off? What was a recent disability movie that someone's watched?
Yeah, so last night I watched this French film called Untouchable. It's about a very rich disabled guy who is, I think he's paralyzed, and he's looking for a care assistant to help him. And it's just about you know, about him, his relationship with the care assistant, and how they enable each other to get the most out of life. Now, obviously, there's been an American release of the same film called The Upside with Kevin Hart, but I chose to go to the French version because I thought that is a much better a way to show how it is in reality. So yeah, basically, this film is kind of one of my favorite disability films. It's kind of the kind of care assistant that I think all of us would like to find in our lives. But in reality, it's very difficult to get someone like that. And but yeah, basically, the care assistant is in trouble a lot. He's trying to claim benefits because he's not got any let's call it high level education. He's living in the estates and he's surrounded by, you know, people taking drugs, gangs. So basically, it's just about him kind of being transformed by the guy who's playing the paralyzed, the rich guy. And yeah, he's kind of changing his perspective on life and, how to care for disabled people. But also for the guy, he kind of doesn't have much family support. He's very alone, which I think all of us have maybe gone through that once in our lives. And it's just about him coping. He's quite, you know, he doesn't know how to have fun. He's quite uptight. So yeah, the care assistant helps him to loosen up, enjoy life. Just his life is very short, so try and enjoy the moment. And yeah, it's kind of basically going through their relationship and the guy trying to find the disabled guy trying to find love. It's a film that I recommend. Please don't watch The Upside. That is, I do not recommend that one. Please watch the French film Untouchable.
I've only seen The Upside. I can't really compare it to the French one, but
What did you think of the upside?
I thought it was good. I thought, showing somebody getting a new carer that doesn't have any experience.
Mm.
It's sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes not. I think it showed it quite well.
Mm.
Is there a lot of difference to the French version?
I think the American version is much more aggressive in the way they're portraying the care assistant. I'm not sure why, but in the
Mhm.
French one, it's a bit more relaxed, a bit more, you know, bit more comedy. I mean, in the French film, the actor is not even a comedian, and he does a better job than Kevin Hart. But yeah, I think you should watch the French film, then you see the difference that what I feel that there is.
I
I-
think the same, that French movie goes deeper and is not so blank. But in that movie also, it's cool that they help each others out. In the movie, it's a little bit problematic that disabled person always needs other person to get their lives in track.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think yeah, I think you're right. It does present the kind of relationship really well, and kind of yeah, I like the idea, as you say, Ravi, that each person's kind of supporting each other. So you know, it's not just about the disabled person needing help, and that you know that's what the PA does and kind of transforms their life. It's a kind of it's a two-way thing, which I think is more realistic. Um, I'd agree with you, Ravi. Like actually finding a care assistant kind of like that works that well, and you have such a good relationship with is really difficult. And, yeah, I don't know. My experience of people kind of that have been maybe having issues of their own in life, it kind of they often tend to bring those to work, and it kind of affects the relationship. So I'm not sure how kind of yeah clear cut it is that you have someone kind of I don't know who doesn't bring their own problems to you.
For me, it's also that sometimes it's other way around, that you help to get his life on track. That I have only been one assistant, but he afterwards said that he was also quite depressed, and the only thing what motivates him to get up was me. So
Yeah, so that's a good example of that. You know, that kind of in our own experience. Has anyone else had this kind of where you've had that kind of good relationship with carers, care assistants, where they kind of you've kind of helped each other out?
I had one carer a few years back. He was from Pakistan. I think he was a dentist student, but we had a really good relationship with my whole family, even my relatives. They had a really good relationship with him. They always ask for him, even now. But yeah, the one time where he was in a bad place was, I think, a lot of his family died in a car crash in Pakistan, and the first place he came to was my house, and yeah, it was really difficult to see someone sitting down on the sofa next to you, like just crying and doesn't know what to do. So that was the first time where I thought, yeah, I think we've got this kind of special relationship. To know that we had that kind of relationship is still quite, you know, it was a great feeling, and felt like we really got close. But since then, I haven't found anyone that we had that sort of relationship with.
Cool. So let's move on to another movie. Bobby, did you want to talk about what you've watched recently?
Oh, you're talking about the care and disabled person, the fundamentals of caring. I watched that again the other night.
Mm.
Just where the guy just understands, the carer understands the guy's sense of humour. Sort of have a similar sense of humour. It kind of reminds me of myself when I like to wound people up and doing the things I was doing.
Mm.
And yeah.
And how does that kind of compare to your own experience?
Yeah, I said, not go to the point of pretending to choke like the guy did, but it just reminded me a little bit my sort of sense of humour. So it's relatable.
Some kind of movies like The Fundamentals of Caring. There is also that person who have lost his child or something like that went to the one to general to help him, but with that movie sometimes it's the genre is a little bit too cautious and it doesn't go anywhere, and
Yeah.
it was very funny to see that.
I think it'd be really good if like films can related to disability can maybe go back in history and find people who have changed like the course of events or changed perceptions of how disabled people are, like Tanya Gray Thompson, the Paralympian, or going back to that film called Breathe, where it's related to St. Thomas Hospital when they opened up the Lane Fox unit and that history of that. So it'd be really good if people can maybe, it's good the fictional films where it's light-hearted and quite fun, but it'd be good to go back historically to see who has changed course of events, and that can help maybe even change perception with disabled people. So that'd be a good thing to see going forward if they're able to go into that a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a few things, but yeah, I think more definitely. It would be great to see more. So looks like Rhys, our other panelist, has finally kind of made it on. So I shall let him in. Hey Rhys, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm nice, right?
Ravi was just talking about the upside and which is a American remake of the French film Untouchable. So yeah, Ravi, how did the how did the movie kind of leave you? I mean, let's talk about Untouchable because you preferred that one. How did it kind of make you feel? Did it kind of make you reevaluate anything in your own life?
It made me feel about how I wish I could get a carer like that can help me, enable me to get the most out of my life. So like in the film, it was like going on a plane to have some time away to breathe. Other times he's going to galleries, operas, things that he likes to do without thinking about obstacles like how am I going to get there? How can I get accessible seating? Obviously, the difference is he's very rich. So, when they say money doesn't make you happy, well, to be honest, if you're disabled, money can enable you to do things that normal people can do. So, I mean, for me, it shows what can be done if you have the right person to help you get what you want, takes that stress out of your life. But yeah, it made me feel like, if even if you don't have the right carer, just to work on getting what you want out of life and how much like positivity it can bring to you, how much enjoyment you can get out of it. I think that shows in the film, how that can be done, and also that disabled people can be very intelligent people, no matter what the disability is, and I think they show that in the film as well.
I think we all know what we would want to do with that money and this kind of assistance. So yeah.
Yeah, so it certainly does help when you have the money. It's a lot of barriers that you can kind of remove and not have to worry about. Yeah, I think the main thing for me that like in these kind of movies where you've got that the relationship between the person doing the care and the disabled person, it's always kind of like there's an obsession to just focus on that one relationship and like in reality for a lot of us we have a lot of people kind of in and out, and it's really that kind of just a one-to-one relationship where you've got the one person doing everything. And I'm not sure how accurate that is. I think it's kind of just an artifact of the movie because that's what makes a good story. And yeah, I think there's often a lot more complexity in people's lives.
Yeah, I know my own carer has 2 carers during the day, so it's a different dynamic compared to a one-to-one thing.
Yeah.
I've had experience with both now. So
I think that you gotta spread yourself between each carer, and it's very difficult to compartmentalize sometimes. I remember when one person has kind of got going on, just like, or for example, the conversation started because you can't very well not talk to your carer all day, so you kind of have to be there by each individual person's thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, oh, that's cool. And do you find yourself like any of you? Do you find yourselves kind of like picking holes in things when you're like, particularly if you're watching something about like someone that's meant to have Duchenne, but obviously it's a non-disabled actor? Do you ever kind of like pick holes in the details that might not be quite right?
Yeah, you kind of do. You kind of like point out that's not right. Usually the way the actor moves, sometimes you think, that's not right. But I didn't bring up Inside and Dancing, right? Because in that, I think James McAvoy sort of nails it. He kind of, I don't know, his movements, the way he speaks, he's kind of got it right there.
It's interesting you say that because I know when I watched Inside I'm Dancing, I was a lot younger. I was in my 20s, and I still had a reasonable amount of movement, and the way he was talking about and describing Duchamp, I was like, well, that's not what it's like. But then, if I watched it now, I'd probably be like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. So I think you kind of learn yourself about.
Yeah, I see. I mean, it's interesting how every body person interprets muscular dystrophy. I mean, because it's like for them, they kind of, well, they don't really know what it's like, so they can only imagine it, right?
So, Bobby, what's the fundamentals of caring like in that regard? Do you feel it's quite realistic?
Yeah, it's not something I really noticed. I didn't. But the first time I watched it, I didn't know that the guy playing the guy with Duchenne was actually able-bodied in real life.
Yeah, in that movie, it's very hard to see that he has a Duchenne because he moves with hands quite well, and you don't see that struggle with moving in a wheelchair, and also electric wheelchair doesn't have a headrest and this kind of thing.
I think it just depends how far you are with your condition when you watch the film, what stage you're at, and what movement you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all kind of learn as we go along what their kind of condition is like, and there might be some things that we don't really realize when we're younger. I always try not to get too hung up on that kind of stuff because I guess the point of the movie is that kind of message of it and the kind of the whole experience. But I think it just sometimes there's just things that jar with you. That it just doesn't match your experience, and sometimes that can ruin a movie. I mean, I think with Inside I'm Dancing and James McAvoy, who you mentioned, Rhys, I think he actually did some work before the movie to actually meet people with the condition and actually observe it. I think I remember reading something about that.
Good. It does raise awareness, doesn't it? Somewhat. Like, I mean, I do feel that more people need to have an understanding of, well, maybe not just Duchenne, but other conditions. I mean, it sort of, it does give perspective, doesn't it, to able-bodied people? Just they get depressed about things that we often find very media like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think ultimately, if more films have disabled actors, they probably get it right more of the time. Okay, maybe let's move on to another one. Yuri, is there one you want to talk about? Maybe something with a slightly different feel, so maybe not so much care assistant and disabled
Yeah.
person. Is something else you might want to mention?
I would mention movie Cinemhereability.
Hmm.
If you want to know more about disabled persons in film, it is quite much American centered and gives out the history of the movies, like from the early beginnings, like Frankenstein or something like that, until then he puts up all the movie business also, that where the persons are disabled persons are involved in movie business and what they can do or what they need to do. And for me it was quite good movie, because there I found quite many movies or series but I didn't know nothing about.
Oh.
Like one good example was 60s serial named Ironside. It's about the detective who is going to get into the wheelchair and solves the different cases. And very interesting part with that movie was that there was shown the accessible buses. And it was very funny because actually that bus in a movie didn't work as it showed. And afterwards, one disabled persons start to produce those buses, because who were watching that series was also wanting that this kind of car or bus from themselves. And from that started producing the real cars, what is usable for actually disabled persons.
That's really interesting. That something kind of that's not actually real is like just imagined in a movie and then actually made real. That's
Yeah,
that's quite
it was a
powerful.
good example about it.
Mm.
I don't really think disability has been brought to the mainstream in films yet. I mean, a lot of these films are foreign films or university projects or B films.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff like I mean, it's not necessarily positive examples though. Like I guess Me Before You was kind of more of a mainstream one, wasn't it? And has anyone actually seen that?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah, I've seen that, and I'm always quite pissed about it all the time where I see it. I think the main problem is that the euthanasia team seem real. That that your life is quite well actually, and the girl is who is quite mad about you and ready to do anything, and still you think that I want to go to Switzerland and kill myself.
Yeah, that's a real commitment to the idea that life is not worth living.
Yes,
Like
that's the main.
even when things are going really well, it's still you want to kill yourself.
You do think at some point that he might eventually change his mind and not go through with it, but it does.
Usually, yeah, it's the same way that usually in the hospital or when you are in the beginning, then you think that I want to die right now. But
Yeah.
but afterwards, persons cope with it, find the ways how to live further.
Exactly. When things are going well, it's harder to understand how they, you know, the protagonist could actually want that. You could understand it in, you know, when you're in the darkest moments. That makes sense. But yeah, not when things are going well.
I think we all felt that way at some point, but we always find a way, and there's always something positive to focus on.
It does highlight the you know, the other side of disability where there are people who can't cope with the condition,
Yeah.
who thinks that everything is ending for them. But I can understand that part of it. But I mean, yeah, for the film, it seems like the disability is the kind of the background information. It's not, they kind of want that film to be just about the love story or the romance, but everything else is just background noise.
On the Inside I'm Dancing movie, Rhys, it's obviously it's a bit old now. So maybe kind of might have dated a little bit. I mean, what do you think about the kind of because it was kind of ultimately a bit tragic, wasn't it? If I remember.
Yeah, I think it shows kind of the realistic truth. But like I said, there is a positive output to that film. I mean, the relationship he has with the guy with cerebral palsy, you know, it shows that. Well, for example, I give me and my brother, right, who passed away, and our bond was similar like that. You know, we understood each other, and I think that was the positive aspect of that film.
Yeah, in that movie, the nursing home is quite realistic. What is going on there? And also, I like the part with the girl assistant, who they find and problems with that love doesn't get any answers, and is going to be miserable and mad about it.
I was saying the thing that I got out of that film is never employ a carer based on looks. Do not go on looks alone.
That's always true.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's kind of a common mistake. It's quite realistic in that way. And particularly with the kind of unrequited love aspect, I'm sure we can all kind of relate to that at previous times in our lives. I mean, not necessarily with a carer, but certainly with a friend or something. And I think yeah, I thought it captured that quite well. I mean, it is ultimately tragic. I do think it was kind of a product of its time. So, you know, at the time, that was pretty much the norm for, you know, people with Duchenne is they get a respiratory infection and then they would die. Obviously, now we're much more using ventilators. It can still happen that way. But you know, there's more hope, I think, than there was then.
It isn't the death sentence that it used to be.
I think the main message for me about that film was about like kind of like the power of the guy Rory's like his spirit kind of thing, like how he changed everyone's lives around him by his kind of personality.
Also, it shows that independence is achievable.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and yeah, even if it was a bit tricky to get it right, you know, it's still that's kind of almost just opened up his life for him, didn't it?
Because I think we've all faced those challenges.
Yeah, I think in that film, kind of because of his independence, his confidence grew more and more, which is, you know, there are some people who unfortunately are not in that position. So it does show how much it can affect your personality with the amount of independence you can have in your life.
Yeah, and that movie take that it's important how you live, not how long you live.
Did you see that movie, Ravi?
No,
No.
I have seen another film about someone with the shed money to gain independence. It's quite an old film. It's 1990, I think. But it starts off with someone with the shed living with his mum, and they can't look after him. I think the story is set in the 60s or 70s or something, and they're not able to look after him anymore, so he gets put in like an old people's home to begin with, and then moves into a residential home for disabled kids, and it shows how he wants to get independent and be able to live in his own place. And so many kids received a grant at the end of it. It must be based on a true story, and they get this money to go and live in their own places.
Oh wow, okay. It sounds very similar in terms of the like storyline. Be interesting to dig that out, find out what that one is, because yeah, sounds really interesting.
When You Remember Me.
Oh right. Well, that's a good one to check out. Has anyone seen Crip Camp? Because that was the movie that I watched last night.
I have seen it.
No. Okay, so basically it's a story about basically a camp for disabled young people in the US, and basically was a place where people met and kind of formed a kind of friendship group that then went on to kind of become a major like campaigning and advocacy force in the States, and basically responsible for the first legislation in the US. But yeah, I just thought it was a really good movie just to see that kind of backstory and that history, and like the camp was really interesting because it was it started off as a traditional camp for disabled young people, as you might expect, probably like I don't know, quite cringy in a way, and not necessarily about independence. But as it evolved, it became like much more about giving disabled young people kind of the opportunity to have the same experiences as other people, and you know, to be teenagers and to kind of break the rules of it. It was run by hippies at the time, but the movie was set, and so it was really kind of an interesting kind of look at it. Like at one point, they the camp is infested with crabs because they're all these teenagers suddenly becoming sexually active and kind of it's completely like unregulated. It sounds like a disaster, but it was quite an interesting look at the camp. But I think what I found most meaningful about it was what happened after that, and it's based on a true story, and it was just following the story of how they went from that kind of camp friendship group to like an advocacy force, and there was one point that really changed things in terms of the like introducing the first discrimination law in the US, and basically, you know, they've been advocating and campaigning for this for ages, and just not getting listened to and getting completely ignored, and they just went and they just occupied some like government buildings, and like they stayed there for I'm not sure how many days it was. It might have been around like 25, 30 days, or maybe even more. I'm not sure, but they basically just set up camp in the government building until they got listened to. And I mean, it sounded a bit horrendous. Like you had like people with kind of spinal injuries, unable to kind of turn themselves in bed and like you know, to avoid getting pressure sores, and they were kind of being forced to sleep on the floor of this government building because they were kind of determined not to leave until something happened, and they like eventually they caused so much like hassle with this that they got what they were campaigning for, and they got the discrimination law. But I think for me, it was just, it really showed how, like how hard it was to actually get listened to, and made me kind of reevaluate things myself. Really, I think we're things have moved on so much, and we've got a lot more opportunities now. But there's still areas where there is discrimination. Kind of disabled people are treated as second-class citizens. But it kind of made me realize that if you want to change that, you've really got to commit, and you really kind of like got to go in for it, and like yeah, if you want to change things, you have to make a complete nuisance of yourself, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even though in society it should be a given thing, shouldn't it? We should be listened to like everybody else, but unfortunately we're not listened to like we should be. Like.
No, I think we're listened to a lot more than we were, certainly than they were kind of back then. But there's certain areas I think that have improved, and certain areas that just haven't moved at all. And like even when you're listened to, you don't necessarily, it doesn't mean you're heard. But it does just, it made me feel like maybe we need to be a little bit more more like activists, and kind of not letting ourselves not be heard, basically, and how you combat that. Bobby, were you going to say something?
If I could just go a little bit off topic,
Yeah.
like you were saying about striving for change and how to be active. A few weeks ago, we live in a story 25 years before, where a group of disabled people in London sort of disrupting traffic, like handcuffing themselves to buses and
Yeah.
underneath, which passed the Disability Discrimination Act. That's just a story there of how to make a change you have to be forceful.
It's tricky these days to figure out how you kind of interpret that and make that work in the current situation. But I think I think for me, just the message is that you have to be really resilient to kind of to really achieve change, and really willing to kind of just make it as difficult as possible for people to ignore you.
I think the fact is in society today we are more tolerated than we are listened to. Certainly I feel that way.
One movie is also, I don't know, are you seeing the Sessions?
Yeah, I watched that last night.
Oh, cool.
I remember at the time the film was made, I think it was about 10 years ago, the idea of sex and disability probably never talked about, or I personally never read anything about it at that time the film was made. It's only seemed to start making waves now. These days, hearing a lot more stories about it.
I also watched it. It's quite good movie that it goes, because the main character was also from family where who were Catholics, and didn't discuss these kind of themes in their home. So after that, he finds the one specialist who is helps to get to know his sexuality and try out the sex also. But in the end, he found a person who is going to get his girlfriend, and it's also about the real life story.
Yeah. I think
It's an eye opener.
yeah,
It's kind of
definitely.
always been a taboo subject in society, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Disabled and sexual.
It has. I mean, for me, it introduced me to the idea of what a sex therapist was, and kind of how that differed, and how that was like its own specific thing. Like I don't think I'd really kind of come across that before that movie. So it was really good to see how that was like a kind of therapy, and how it was much about teaching him about his own kind of like body and his sexual preferences and what was possible, and gave so much confidence.
But it's almost a negative there because the idea of needing a sex therapist probably wipes the idea that you could do this on your own.
I mean, you could, but I think just some people aren't confident or to have never been able to talk about it or think about it, and they you can't. It's hard to start a relationship when you've got no self-esteem and no even awareness of what's even possible. And
I think that is right.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be brought to the mainstream.
Mm.
I mean, if others think and know it's possible, then you get rid of that idea that I'll never do it.
but yeah, it was kind of like you had to separate your emotions from the like the sex therapy work, and like see it as it's about learning about yourself rather than trying to have a romance. And I think that can be quite tricky to see that difference. Maybe that's why there's not more stories of that. I don't know, but or maybe it's just that it's not really thought to be a priority. All right, guys. Well, yeah, just want to say thanks everyone for your contributions. I think we had a lot of movies that that we've all seen. Hopefully, some recommendations there for others as well. I know I'll definitely be checking out some of these that we've been discussing, and yeah. So thanks for joining the podcast, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Well,
Yeah,
thank